This is Chairman Mao Capi, the most ambitious capybara the wetlands have ever known. He sits on a bamboo throne, wrapped in crimson algae, gazing over endless fields of reeds. To his mind, the swamp is destined for greatness, and under his paw, it will leap there. But there's a problem. The swamp is poor, slow, divided between lazy pond workers and greedy beavers who hoard the juiciest lily pads. To Mao Capi, this imbalance is a sickness, and only a total transformation can cure it. He dreams of turning the entire wetland into one roaring modern paradise, where every capybara eats full leaves and sings his praises at dawn. It sounds noble, even heroic. Except that in the world of capybaras, noble dreams have a habit of trampling reality. Thus begins the Great Leap Forward. In the late 1950s of Capi time, Mao Capi declares a campaign to outgrow every other swamp in the world. He tells his followers, "In just a few seasons, we will surpass the beaver kingdoms in leaf steal and outproduce the frog empires in crops." The wetlands erupt in applause. But here's what that means in practice. Each commune, a vast collective of hundreds of families, must work as one unit. No more private ponds, no more personal gardens. All leaves belong to the collective. Every capybara eats from one kitchen, sleeps under one reed roof, and farms for the glory of the swamp. The idea sounds equal. But equality enforced by decree can turn quickly into obedience. Local leaders, desperate to please Mao Capi, compete to promise the impossible. One commune vows to double its harvest. Another claims it can melt mud into steel. Reports flood in. Record yields, record production, record happiness. None of it is real, but no one dares to say so because truth has quietly been reclassified as treason. To catch up with the industrial beavers, Mao Capi declares that every family must build a backyard furnace. He calls it steel of the people, but the capybaras call it leaf fire. Across the wetlands, cooking pots, fishing tools, and even heirloom reed sculptures are thrown into homemade kilns. Day and night, the furnaces roar. Every capybara melts whatever metal they can find, believing they are forging the future. But when the smoke clears, the result is not steel. It's sludge, brittle, useless lumps of burnt mud and melted spoons. Still, the swamp newspapers announce victory. Production has tripled, they write, above pictures of smiling workers beside piles of twisted scrap. The irony is lost on few, but spoken by none. Because by now, silence is loyalty. Meanwhile, in the fields, the leaf collectives begin their own competition. Officials order dense planting, believing more sprouts mean more yield. Capybaras crowd the soil so tightly that the roots suffocate. But reports claim otherwise. Record harvests again. In some communes, local chiefs stage elaborate performances. They pluck leaves from neighboring fields and pile them high for inspectors to see. They even stack the harvest on platforms so tall that from a distance it looks like abundance. Mao Capi beams with pride. He declares the swamp has entered a golden era. In celebration, he orders more of the harvest to be sent as tribute to allied jungles, the Frog Federation, the Otter Union. He wants to show that the Great Leap Forward works. Except there's a grim catch. All that tribute comes from barns that were never full in the first place. Behind the grand parades, storage huts stand empty, and when winter comes, so do the hollow bellies. It begins quietly, a rumor, a missing meal, a child too weak to swim. Then the hunger spreads like algae across still water. Villages once proud of their record yields now ration mud soup. Families scrape bark, boil roots, chew dry reeds for the illusion of fullness. But still, they smile when inspectors arrive. Because in the new swamp, reporting hunger is sabotage. Admitting failure means disloyalty, and disloyalty means punishment. So reports continue, the swamp thrives, while the swamp itself starves. Some capybaras begin eating strange things, bark, clay, insects, even the reeds of their own huts. Entire colonies vanish into silence. But newspapers still print cartoons of smiling workers under banners of prosperity. For 4 long seasons, this continues. The Great Leap Forward, intended to leap into paradise, instead sinks into famine. Historians of the wetland will later count tens of millions of lost capybaras. But during those years, the only thing officially reported lost was faith. faith blamed on bad weather and counter-revolutionary frogs. Why didn't anyone stop it? Because by this point, Mao Capi is more than a leader. He's the sun god of the swamp. Every morning, capybaras chant his name. Every hut displays his portrait, eyes shining like dawn light. Every reed scroll repeats his words, "To doubt the leap is to doubt the future." No one wants to doubt the future. So they keep leaping into empty fields, empty furnaces, and empty stomachs. Those who question the plan are branded reactionary moss. They vanish into re-education ponds where they're told to think again, harder, until they agree. And even when Mao Capi's advisors whisper the truth, that communes are collapsing, that hunger is spreading, he refuses to believe. Because a god does not admit mistakes, especially not when the statues are already being built. By 1960, Capi calendar, the swamp has reached its peak illusion. Local leaders report harvests so absurd that central warehouses overflow on paper but are empty in reality. Still, Mao Capi orders more exports of leaf grain to allied jungles, boasting that the wetland has more than it can eat. In truth, entire provinces have nothing left to harvest. Workers faint in the fields. Communes quietly raid each other's storehouses. But no one reports it because numbers have replaced lives. When famine victims die, records list them as migrated to other ponds. When entire villages disappear, maps are quietly redrawn. The swamp's statistics stay perfect even as its people vanish. It's not bureaucracy, it's make-believe written in official ink. Eventually, the silence becomes impossible to hide. Even the loyalist inspectors notice that meetings are emptier, villages quieter, and reports too perfect to be real. By 1961, the great experiment collapses under its own weight. The sky has not fallen, but everything else has. Mao Capi, facing quiet revolt within his inner circle, reluctantly allows other elders to take charge. Pragmatic beaver technocrats who believe in mud, not miracles. They scrap the backyard furnaces, shrink the communes, and restore small ponds to local families. Slowly, very slowly, the swamp begins to recover. But the cost is beyond calculation. For every green shoot that returns, a dozen graves lie beneath. Looking back, the Great Leap Forward stands as one of the darkest parables in the history of the capybara world. It wasn't born from malice alone, but from faith turned fanatic. From the belief that nature and truth could be commanded by decree. The tragedy wasn't that capybaras dreamed too big. It's that they weren't allowed to wake up. And the symbolism remains powerful even today. The furnaces, once blazing symbols of progress, are now rusted monuments to delusion. The collectivized fields, once promising abundance, became silent memorials to obedience. And the empty slogans carved into bamboo poles still whisper in the wind, "Leap forward, leap forever." Between 1958 and 1962, Mao Zedong, leader of the People's Republic of China, launched the Great Leap Forward, an ambitious plan to transform a mostly agrarian society into an industrial powerhouse. He collectivized farms into communes, banned private ownership, and mobilized the population for massive industrial projects, including the infamous backyard furnaces meant to rival Western steel output. Officials exaggerated results and misinformation traveled upward. Believing success was everywhere, the government continued exporting grain while domestic supplies collapsed. The result was one of the worst famines in human history, causing an estimated 30 to 45 million deaths. Entire regions were devastated by hunger and social breakdown. The political system rewarded optimism and punished truth, making correction nearly impossible until it was too late. After the disaster, Mao briefly stepped back from day-to-day governance, and more pragmatic leaders restored agricultural reforms. But the damage was irreversible, physically, economically, and psychologically. In the capybara universe, we call this the Great Leap Forward, a time when the swamp tried to leap to the moon only to land face first in the mud. At its root, the tragedy was not about incompetence alone. It was about illusion, amplified by fear and loyalty. When truth becomes dangerous, lies become patriotic. When every report must please the leader, numbers replace reality. And when leaders believe their own propaganda, disaster becomes inevitable. The Great Leap Forward was the perfect storm of ambition, control, and denial. The kind that only happens when a society stops listening to itself. Even decades later, the wetlands remember. Older capybaras still whisper about the Hunger Years, though officially the archives remain shallow ponds, carefully edited. In the distance, statues of Mao Capi still rise above the reeds, one paw raised toward an invisible horizon. Tourists feed the pigeons below, unaware that the soil they stand on once swallowed entire communes. And perhaps that's the quietest irony of all. The leap meant to end suffering became the silence that followed it. So, what does the Great Leap Forward teach us, capybaras, monkeys, and humans alike? That progress is not a sprint of obedience, but a crawl of honesty. That 1,000 smiling reports cannot replace one honest harvest. That the loudest dreams often hide the deepest hunger. In the end, the swamp learned, at terrible cost, that you cannot command abundance by decree, nor silence famine with slogans. Nature and truth obey no ideology, no leader, no banner. They only obey reality. And reality, unlike propaganda, doesn't care how red your flag is. Today, when you hear the phrase leap forward, remember the capybaras of that age, melting their pots for steel, applauding while they starved, smiling because they had to. Remember that blind faith, even when dressed as progress, can turn any paradise into a graveyard of reeds. And if any capybaras are confused, remember, this was not just a story about leaves and furnaces. It was the story of how belief, untested and unquestioned, can burn brighter than fire and destroy more than it ever creates.